Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for watching. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I made this elf themed cake. Before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe and press the notifications bell for new videos every week, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. It really helps me out. That being said, let's get started. I already have my cakes iced, covered in fondant, and stacked. If you need to see how to do any of those steps, I will link those videos below. I have some white fondant on my cake board, and while it's still a little bit soft, I'm taking my X-Acto knife and cutting out just like a circular wavy-ish shape for a pond. I'm gently pulling that out with my X-Acto knife. I don't want to mess up the shape because I'm going to use this as a template to cut out some blue fondant. I have this really pale blue color here, so I'm going to cut around that and then put it back where the white originally was. Even with the template, I still somehow managed to mess up putting it in there, but after a little bit of finagling, it locked in place just fine. To start on Buddy's suit, I have this little triangular template I made for myself. I just eyeballed this shape, and I'm cutting that out of some bright yellow fondant. I added a little bit of shortening to the back of that, and I'm putting that smack on the front of the bottom tier, and this is going to be like where his pants are on his suit. With a little bit of edible glue, I'm going around the yellow triangle that I created, and I'm also going up in a straight line, as straight as I could get it, all the way to the top of the top tier. I rolled out 2 long stankies of green fondant, and I'm going to bring those up on either side of my triangle, and then they're going to meet in the middle and go all the way up to the top. To give them a little more texture, I'm taking my fondant tool and just marking in a couple of lines. I grab my X-Acto knife and I'm just going to cut out a chunk at the bottom of the top tier to make room for where the belt's going to sit. I added a thick black strap going all the way around and then just cut the seam at the back. For Buddy's hat, you could use a styrofoam cone for this, or you could use some Rice Krispie treats to make it a little bit lighter. My cake was pretty small, so I just went with straight up fondant, and I'm just rolling it into a cone shape. I put that aside to firm up, and then I'm going to start on my belt buckle. So I've rolled out more of my yellow fondant, and then I used a square cutter to get the shape that I wanted. You could use another square cutter to cut out the center, but I couldn't find the next size down, so I just used my X-Acto knife to trim out the middle as best I could. Once the cone was firm enough for me to handle, I put that right on top with just a little bit of edible glue. If you want a little more security, you can add a wooden skewer. For the strip of fabric going around his hat, I used more of that yellow fondant. When I was putting this on, I thought it was so straight, but I had to take a step back when I was done and realized that it was uber crooked. So take your time with this. To make it look a little more fabric-y, I grabbed my fondant tool and marked in some long lines going all the way around. Buddy has a little feather in his cap, so I rolled out some red fondant, cut out this lemon type shape, and then with my fondant tool marked a line up the center, and with my X-Acto knife I just frayed the edges all the way from the top to the bottom. Once I was ready to apply it to my cake, I used a piece of spaghetti and another piece of that red fondant just to secure it to the back with a little bit of my edible glue, and just stuck that right in there where I wanted it. Before I added the belt buckle, I wanted to dust it with some gold luster dust. All the materials that I use in this video will be listed down below. And then I'm adding that to the front of the belt with more of my edible glue. Buddy has this really pretty gold stitching on his suit, so I mixed more of that gold luster dust with a little bit of food grade alcohol, and I'm just doing the design on either side. I completely made it up. I couldn't really make out what it was on the suit, so I just ended up doodling all the way down. So once I was done with the painting, it looked like this. To finish off his suit, I'm adding the white collar. I have a strip of white fondant that I'm wrapping all the way around, and I just use shortening for this because if you use water and edible glue, it can stick on there pretty good, and you're not going to have a lot of time to move it around if you make a mistake, like I tend to do with every single cake I make. Once it was on there, I just trimmed the front so that it kind of sloped away in a bit of a V shape. Because the collar is like this fluffy fabric, I grabbed my fondant tool and I'm just roughing it up, adding some texture all the way around so it didn't look so flat. As I was adding the texture, I realized that the shape was a bit off, so I just went back in and trimmed it down. Now that his suit is done, I can start on my decorations. So I'm going to do the etch and sketch first. I have this gray fondant that I added a little bit of Tylose powder to, and I'm rolling it out a little bit on the thicker side. I'm using my cutter to punch out a square, and then I'm letting that sit for about 10 minutes just so the Tylose can do its thing and make it a little more firm. After it sat, I covered the whole thing with some red fondant, and I'm just smoothing that over the top and down the sides. I used my pizza cutter to cut away the excess, and then using my fingers, I'm just reshaping it so it still looks like a square. You don't have to have perfectly pointed corners or anything, you just don't want any of that red fondant to be peeking out. I'm cutting the center out with my X-Acto knife, being really careful not to cut all the way through to the gray fondant, and then I'm just taking the middle out. I used a piping tip to cut 2 circles out of some white fondant, and those are going to be on either side for the little itty bitty handles. Now, I'm not the best at writing stuff out. I have chicken scratch, so if you can do this fancier like he does in the movie, you can go ahead. I just wrote one of my favorite lines out of the whole movie on there. It is not perfect, but it did the job. I'm using straight up black food coloring with my fine tip paintbrush. I traced out what I wanted to say first and then went back over it and just made it bold. Next, I'm going to make a couple of trees, so I have this dark green fondant that I'm rolling out into this long cone shape, and then I'm inserting a skewer all the way through it. Apologies, I was doing this part so it's a little bit out of focus, but I'm grabbing a little pair of scissors that I use exclusively for cake decorating, and I'm going to start cutting into the tree, starting from the bottom, going all the way up to give it like the pine tree look. For my narwhal, I have dark blue fondant that I'm rolling out into this sausage type shape, making sure the top is a little thinner than the bottom, and then I'm cutting that with my knife at an angle. I used my fondant tools to mark in a mouth and then where his little eye is going to go, and I filled that in with a ball of black fondant. To make his teeny tiny little horn, I have a piece of spaghetti and yellow fondant, and I tried to make it like I would like with my unicorn cake, where it was tapered at one end and I'm wrapping it around. You don't have to do this. If you just want to make one like by twisting 2 pieces together, you can do that. This was a bit of a hassle. It took me a little bit to get it, but it gives you the extra stability of having that spaghetti stick in there if you can get it right. For the infamous plate of spaghetti, I have this circle of white fondant, and I just used first my balling tool to kind of dent out the middle and then made it a little bit bigger with the end of my fondant roller. I popped a little bit of ivory colored fondant into my clay extruder and then just made these long strings of spaghetti-like shapes. I rolled out little tiny balls of green, red, and white for the candies and marshmallows. And then I took some clear corn syrup and mixed some black into it because the chocolate sauce looks quite dark, and I just tried to drip that over. It didn't really work, ended up like just blobbing it on. I rolled out some brown fondant for the broken up Pop-Tarts and just cut out some squares, marked in some little circles for the texture, and then placed those on there. I did fray some of the edges to make them look broken. We cannot forget the maple syrup. I added some brown to my corn syrup to make it a lighter color, and then just dragged that over the whole thing, making sure that it went onto the plate a little bit so you could really see it. You could use real maple syrup for this, but I just didn't have any. Finally, for my last decoration, I have a strip of red and white fondant, and I'm just going to twist those together until I have this candy cane-esque vibe going on. And now to start putting everything together. For the board, I have some white fondant. I'm just adding some balls all over the place, concentrating them to one side where the little pool is. I've got some powdered sugar in my sifter or sieve, if you will, and I'm going all over my board. Anywhere where there's white, I want to cover it with my powdered sugar. It doesn't matter if you get it on the blue part, and it doesn't matter if you get it on Buddy. We'll just brush it off when we're done. I'm getting rid of all of that excess. And then I want to brush the icing sugar to the sides of my pool. This just makes it look a little more snowy to me versus just the flat white fondant. Next, I'm adding my trees. I just trimmed down my skewer, and I did add a little extra piece of fondant just to give it some more staying power. And then if you kind of squish anything while you're adding it, you can just re-cut in with those scissors. To help them fit in with the board, I just sprinkled a little more of my powdered sugar on the trees as well. Next, I'm adding my narwhal, so I'm putting the horn in the top, and you can see the little side flipper he's got going on there. I just painted the horn with the same gold I used for the texture on his suit. I stuck my etch and sketch in place, and then I realized that the narwhal kind of looked a little bit odd just sitting on the blue there, so I rolled out some long snakies of that light blue fondant and just added him around for like a ripple in the water effect. I added my little candy cane pole using the same method I did for the tree with a little bit of spaghetti, and I added a ball of white fondant on the top. I added a little pile of snowballs to the side of Buddy as well. Lastly, I added the spaghetti onto the board there as well. And then this was the final result, guys. I really hope you liked this video. I know it was a long one, but I wanted to add all of the things that I loved about Elf on there. I friggin' love that movie, so I really wanted to make a cake about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.